Okay, thank you everybody for joining. We had a session on um, tips for college applications, and that was very well received. And so there was a request for a session on internships, and Anika has kindly agreed to do that. So thank you, Anika. Thanks. We really appreciate your putting the time and effort to do this presentation. And she, just by background, I think she has at least couple of successful internships. So I thought it'll be good if she can share some tips with us. So go ahead, Anika. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself because there are some new people on the call today?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so nice to meet everyone. I'm Anika. I'm a junior at UC Berkeley studying economics and political economy. And in terms of internships, I did a internship as a business analyst at the Federal Reserve freshman year, and then I did a research internship at Morgan Stanley this summer. And then next summer, I'm doing investment banking at Bank of America. But outside of summers, which has been mainly finance, I've also gotten to do some consulting projects. Like right now, I'm doing a consulting project with Khan Academy. So if anyone's interested in that side of things, I can talk about that a little too. I think it might be helpful just to know a little bit about who's on the call so that I can tailor my advice to the age range. So if people don't mind just putting in the chat if you're a parent or if you're a student, if you're in high school or like what year of college or what year of high school, that would be really helpful.
And while people do that, do you want to just are you going to show some slides?
Yeah, so I will share my
Why don't
presentation.
you go ahead and start sharing that way? While
Okay.
people are putting their comments, we can get that set up.
Ashimama, is the slide sharing?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, sounds good. So, one person said junior year of high school. If everyone else could just really quickly just message me or everyone, doesn't matter. Um, oh, perfect. Some are coming in. Okay, this is really helpful. So it seems like it's a mix of high school students and then younger college students. So I would say that this presentation is geared towards freshmen and sophomores in college. So if that's you, then perfect. If you're a little bit older, I think there'll still be helpful advice. And if you're in high school, I think it's always better to be prepared and I don't wanna have anyone in high school feel like they need to be having internships. I didn't have any internships in high school, but a lot of people these days are able to do internships, and so I'll definitely incorporate advice for high school students specifically. So with that all started, I have a presentation, and then I was thinking we could do questions, but feel free to ask questions. You don't have to wait till after. Feel free to ask during. I know sometimes people don't want to interrupt, but I don't mind. And you can put it in the chat as well. I just might not notice if.
I, I can track the questions on chat, so don't worry about
Okay, sounds good. And yeah, parents, it'll be really helpful for you all too because it will help you help your students and kids, and it's also just really helpful information, I think. So, this is just a little overview of what I was planning to talk about. So, I was going to start with tips about resumes, and then your cover letter, and then how to network, and then lastly, an overview of common careers people pursue from college. And so, since there are a lot of high school students on the call, don't worry if you don't know what a cover letter is. I'll go through everything. So, starting with your resume, I assume most people know what that is. So, it's basically one page on your main experiences. Also, Ashimamu, can you hear me fine? Because my video is frozen for me.
No, we can hear you fine. I know video the feed has stopped, but that's fine. I mean, go ahead. We can actually listen to you properly. So that's
Okay,
you're
sounds
fine.
the presentation accidentally moved forward. Sorry. Okay, so the it's basically one page that is your professional experiences, a little bit about your background and your education. And it's really important because it's basically the one thing anyone that's considering getting giving you an internship or giving you a job will look at. And I'm sure Ashimamu and the other adults on the call have used their resume long after college. So it's something that you'll probably create in high school or early college and then keep updating for basically the rest of your working life. So this slide is going over the structure of a resume. I think this slide is really helpful for high school students that maybe or college students that have never written a resume before. So you can find good resume templates online. I can also forward anyone one that I like if you're interested. But basically, it's your name and information at the top. Then you have your education, your professional experiences. So that could be internships. When I first got to college, I had like my minimum wage job that I worked on high school on my resume. So you can have jobs like that. I had babysitting on it. And then your leadership and extracurriculars. So that applies in high school as well. So when you first get to college, you're probably going to have more of a leadership and extracurricular section and less of a professional experience section, which is totally fine. For people that have a more technical skill set, such as coding, um, they usually have a section with their personal projects, and then lastly, your skills and interests. So, skills would be like, for example, I know how to use Excel, and interests would be like, for example, I'm interested in rap music. So, this is just a little bit on formatting. You want to make sure that you're using a font that's very legible. I recommend Garamond. And you also want to format your dates the same. So, you don't want to say like January 2000 and then somewhere else say like Feb and use an abbreviation. So, make sure everything's consistent. The whole point of a resume is to appear professional. Um, and then, sorry, I'm just gonna see for 1 second if I stop screen sharing and start again. I think my Wi-Fi will get better. Okay, yeah. I think I unfroze now, right?
Yeah, we can see you now.
Okay, great. The third thing is just to use one column, which is pretty simple. I think that's what most people do. And then a little bit of advice on fonts and margins. So this is all just things to keep in mind when you're making your resume. This, I think, is the most important slide in terms of resumes, and it has to do with content. So, you want to make sure everything on your resume you can talk about because in interviews, especially once you get to college, you're going to be grilled on your experiences. And so, if you put something on that's an exaggeration of the truth, that will become clear when people start asking you questions about the exact thing that you did. You also want your different bullet points to be your impact. So you don't want to be, let's say I was in this club in high school and we helped fundraise for girls' education in India. So I don't want to be like, we fundraise $2,000. And that might be something that if you've never written a resume sounds fine to you, but you actually want to be like, I led a bake sale that raised, like, talk specifically about your role because they're not worried about your team. They're never going to meet your team members. They want to know basically if you had never been a part of the organization, what wouldn't have happened? What was your personal impact? And then it's just common practice to begin bullet points with verbs. So, for example, led, organized, orchestrated, any of those type of language. And then lastly, explain exactly what you did. And the biggest piece of advice that I see on new resumes is people don't quantify what they did. So, for example, they'll say, oh, I invited speakers to my high school to talk about the harms of texting and driving for a public safety measure. So that's fine and well, but you have to quantify what your impact was. So one way to do that in this situation would be to talk about how many students were able to listen to the speaker. Once you start having professional experiences, ways to do that is to quantify like your impact on the sales of a team you were on or something like that. And those numbers are not going to be given to you by your boss a lot of the time. Like a lot of the internships I've done, they don't tell me the exact quantification of my work. So, for example, when I was at the Fed, I was working on making these calls that we did more efficient, essentially. And I did, but I didn't really know by how much. So I actually like timed the length of the calls we were doing, saw how much more efficient it was, and then put that statistic in my resume, which I definitely recommend because the more you can use numbers and percentages, the more the other person can understand. This is a link because my Wi-Fi is not the best. I'm not gonna risk clicking on it and then the presentation doesn't work. But if you just Google verbs that will make your resume, this one's awesome, but just to put on your resume, it will explain everything. So it'll be like if you're part of a team that did product development, use these words. If you were fundraising, use these words. So it will tell you exactly what verbs to use. And I highly recommend because you want to be using different verbs and different bullet points. You don't want everything to say, I organize, I organize, I organize. You want to vary what you're talking about. So next we're going to talk about cover letters. So I'm not sure how many of you know what a cover letter is if you're in high school. Most of the college students probably do. So basically a cover letter is one page where you talk about your experiences and why you're interested in a company. So let's say you're applying to Google just as an example, your cover letter would be specific to Google. So the next slide starts to talk about what the goals of a cover letter are. So, the first goal is you want to show that you understand the company and that you've talked to people there. So, that's something that I didn't know coming into college that even before you get a job at a company, you should have talked to a lot of people at the firm. And we'll talk a little bit about how to form those connections. But basically in your cover letter you can call out, I could say, oh, I talked to this person at Google about X as a line in your cover letter. The second thing is you want to demonstrate that this role is exactly what you want and the company is the exact company you want to work for. So why do you want to work for Google over their competitors or another company that does a similar thing should be clear from your cover letter. And then lastly, you want to talk about your skill set. So maybe if you're applying to Google's business development role, you want to talk about how you've done business development at two other companies before. Or maybe you don't have the relevant experience, which is something a lot of people experience in high school and college, in which case you want to talk about, for example, like when I first got to college and I was applying to business roles, I talked about how when I was a scooper at an ice cream store, I got to see what it's like to give good customer service and I got to understand the business from a minimum wage employee's point of view. So you might not think that working at an ice cream store scooping the ice cream is relevant to a business internship, but it actually is. It's all about how you talk about your skill set. So next, we'll talk about what to actually include in your cover letter. So you want to introduce yourself. You want to say why you're applying to the role and the company you're applying for. So a lot of times people end up copying and pasting their cover letters because they don't want to retype it all, which is totally fine, but you'd be surprised how many times people would accidentally send Google a cover letter that still says, "Oh, I want to apply to Facebook." So make sure that's not you. If you're in high school, you've probably heard of people doing this with college essays. It's also a thing with cover letters. Then you want to talk about your professional experiences and your extracurricular experiences and how they fit into the job. So, for example, if you are applying to a software engineering job, you could probably keep these paragraphs the same for a lot of different companies, and that's fine. But make sure you're changing like number two in this list. But you can keep one and three the same and change two and four. So 2 is just a quick summary at the end of what makes you a good fit. So Don't make this super long. I would say 3/4 of a page. Never go over a page because recruiters don't want to read that. And in terms of the importance of your cover letter, they're honestly not that important, at least at the college level. I don't know about once you're older. The reason why is because hearing about you is something that they get from an interview, and your experiences are already on your resume, and it takes a while to read through them. So a lot of jobs no longer require them, and a lot of the ones that do well, I've had recruiters straight up tell me, like, "We're not gonna actually read it." So, definitely try to do your best, but don't spend a lot of time on it. Really, where you wanna spend your time is on your resume and then preparing for interviews. So, next is a little bit about the process to write a cover letter. So, you want to talk to people at the company that I mentioned, and we'll talk a bit more about how you could talk to someone at a company you're interested in, even though you don't know anyone there. And then you want to know your reasons for why you want to join the company, and then also skills that you've developed through your experiences that are relevant. So, that would be like my ice cream store example. So that was a little bit about cover letters. They're definitely not as important as your resume. And we're going to next talk about LinkedIn. And that will actually connect to cover letters because LinkedIn is how you can reach out to people and get what's called coffee chats in college, where you and someone at a company basically discuss their role. And that helps you talk about why you're interested in the company and things like that. So these are just quick tips for your LinkedIn. I'm sure even if you're in high school, you've heard of it. I didn't have one in high school, but I think like high schoolers these days, a lot of them do, since the importance of professional development is becoming a bigger deal at a younger age. Like I know a lot of the incoming freshmen to Berkeley have already had internships, already have LinkedIn's and everything, which is great. You know, don't stress yourself out, but if you can get some of these things done earlier, that will only help you. So these are just really easy tips. Have a professional photo. It doesn't need to be a huge deal. Like you can have your mom or dad take it just with like a plain background. Definitely be smiling. You want to seem approachable. Have a high quality photo. And for bios, so like my bio, if you want to look at my LinkedIn, you can, because I think it's like decent for a college LinkedIn. Just in terms of like I have my experiences clearly listed. My bio is just my email. I don't think you really need one. Um, or if you want to have one about your experiences, you can. And so yeah, number 4 is include your email. And then for 5 and 6, you wanna oh, sorry. You wanna list your skills and connect with people. So when you're younger, sometimes it's hard to connect with people because you don't have as much of a professional network, but once you get to college, it'll be really easy because 'cause you'll meet a lot of people, and don't stress, about, like, having
Ca-
fun.
ca- Anika, can I make a plug for our KOA organization and KP community?
Yes.
I think my simple advice is we have an amazing professional network. So please, reach out to your parents and your relatives, uh, and through them, reach out to people on LinkedIn who you think are relevant. So, again, depending on what field you're interested in, I think our community has pretty much uh, people from almost every field. So it's just matter of you folks reaching out. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that was something I didn't know in high school. Like, I would have been too shy to reach out to someone that I hadn't talked to a bunch of times, just because that's not something you really do when you're younger. And I realized in college that's so common in any group you're a part of. So, like, for me, I'm in a sorority, and when there's girls that are in my same sorority, like, they're also Zetas at other colleges, they'll go out of their way to help you and ask you like if you're interested in their company and just basically help you. And the same applies to like being a Kashmiri in the US. Like you can find other KP individuals that are in fields you're interested in, people within this community that we have here. Definitely reach out to them. That includes like you could reach out to college students, like me included, if you have any questions ever. And people like really will respond to you. It's kind of surprising how helpful people are. And also, Ashimamu, I'm not sure, do we have like a LinkedIn professional group?
There is one group, but it's not very active. So that's part of our agenda to kind of make the professional network more active, and that will include doing sessions like these where we kind of get the community together. So yeah, that's part of our plan.
Okay, great. Yeah. And what I would say is maybe Ashimamu can send the name of the LinkedIn group to you guys, even if there aren't posts. I've noticed like most LinkedIn groups are a lot of times not active just because people don't have anything to post, but they're still really useful because if you're in the same LinkedIn group as someone, you can basically message them for free, which means that you could look and see who's in the group and look at their profile, see if you're interested in the same things, and reach out to them. So next we're going to talk about the importance of cold emailing. So when I was in late high school and before I got to college, I didn't even know what cold emailing was. It's basically when you email a stranger who you don't know at a company you're interested in and ask for 15 to 20 minutes of their time to talk about their role. So when I first heard about it, I was like, why would someone that doesn't know me like take time out of their day to talk to me about their experiences when I have little professional experience? I have nothing to offer them, but actually people definitely will because they want to make sure their company hires the best talent and they're going to have to spend so much time with you if you do work there. And so they want to see if like they vibe with you and you're someone they'd want to be friends with. So this is really important, and I'll talk a little bit about how to do it. So this is an example of a cold email. So this is just my friends, and I just took out his name, but he basically emailed someone and said, "Hi, so and so. Hope you're having an excellent week." And then he introduced himself. So this was for an investment banking internship. In business and finance, coffee chats and cold emailing are like extremely important. In some other fields like tech, it's still important, but it's more common for people to reach out to like the recruiter. Um, and investment banking and finance, if you are interested in finance, is one of the fields where few, if any, people get jobs without sending out emails like this. So, really important to know about because if you don't, you can end up behind. And so now that we know the structure, I would say this is really important to remember, like, the ask of your email, so you don't wanna be like, "Oh, can I have a referral?" or, "Oh, can I have an interview?" You wanna be like, "Oh, can I have a few minutes of your time to hear about your experiences?" Basically. But now that we know the format, we can talk about a few of the do's and don'ts. So, obviously be professional, and you wanna send it during the business day, so they're likely to read it. And if you can add a sentence about, oh, you went to the same college as me, or I'm also a Kashmiri Pundit, things like that are really helpful for people to know who you are. So, like, for example, if someone was interested in Ashimamu's line of work and they're a college student and he's never talked to them, but they're also a Kashmiri Pundit, and they email him and they say, like, KP college student interested in Capgemini or like your line of work, then he's gonna open it and he'll read it and he'll definitely respond, and that's how most people would. Most people would respond and say, "Oh, I would love to talk to you. Let me see if we have internships open. Let me see if you could talk to any of my colleagues." Or, "No, we don't have internships right now, but I have a friend who might have something you're interested in." So this is all really important.
Yeah, and I just want to add, like, generally, if you're reaching out, like, I can talk from the other side, right? If somebody reached out with asking for advice, you're likely to get a response, as opposed to if you just kind of say, I'm only talk about a specific job role, or an internship. I think generally people are more willing to share information and knowledge, and in that process they will also help you with whatever you need in terms of internship or job.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Especially if you don't know someone already, it's not really fair to ask them to, like, give you an internship or give you a referral because they don't know who you are, but if you ask for advice, that's a way to develop your relationship and start networking with people. And then organically from that, people will be like, oh, I really enjoyed talking to this person. They seem really smart. And then, a month from then, they hear about an internship at their company, they're going to email you. And that's one example. There's also a lot of companies that have extremely formalized processes for college students. So, for example, every like investment bank takes a cohort of summer analysts every summer. And so if you're working at an investment bank, you're getting so many cold emails. And so if someone asks for advice, you basically know that they want an internship and they've applied to your internship that summer. That person doesn't need to ask directly for a referral. So now you might be wondering, where do I find strangers' email addresses? So with today's technology, it's actually really easy. So go to LinkedIn, and so what I do is you can filter by what company someone works at. So I'll just give an example of the role I did this summer. So I filtered by currently works at Morgan Stanley, and then currently works at Morgan Stanley in New York City, which is where I applied. And then there's a search function where you can type keywords in their title. And so I typed equity research. And so then everyone that worked in the role that I wanted, in the office that I wanted, at the company that I wanted was a fingertip away. Some people message on LinkedIn. Personally, I think in a lot of industries, people are more likely to respond to email. And so the way to find their email is there's a Google extension called snove.io, and you can find 10 people's email addresses for free a day. And basically, they have their own algorithms that scan people's names and companies to figure out their email. And obviously, it's not correct 100% of the time. So some of your emails will be like not delivered, but most of them do get delivered. I've had pretty good luck. So using Snove.io, you basically select people from LinkedIn, and that goes into a list you have on Snove.io, and that list can be easily exported into Google Sheets. And then there's another extension called Yet Another Mail Merge, where you can have a drafted email. So for example, hi, I'm Anika, and then it'll be like, hi, like X person. It won't have their name. It's basically like, when you get like telemarketing blasts that say your name, they've just basically replaced only your name, everything else is the same. It's similar to that. You can add people's company names and personalize it that way. You can add a sentence at the end, but it allows you to send people a lot of emails at once. And so this is really important in certain fields like investment banking, business development. It can be important in consulting and recruit and tech as well. Um, because for example, like this recruiting cycle, I had to email 1,500 people, which sounds crazy, but I did, just because a lot of people won't respond to you for investment banking. And so obviously, if I had to type out that email 1,500 times, that would be all I could do in a day. It just wouldn't work. And so this software allows you to basically minimize time spent writing an email. And it definitely depends on the industry. Like in some industries, sending out 1,500 emails would be like an extreme red flag. So make sure before you do something like that, is that what people in this industry do? Like what are basically like the common practices? Ask people in college that are older than you. But in like finance, I know for sure it's really common and helps you a lot. So that's why I did it. Next, I wanted to talk about career fairs and info sessions. So, career fairs are when a lot of companies come to your school to talk about opportunities they have, and info sessions are when a company comes to your school to talk about their opportunities specifically for a couple hours. So let's start with the goals of these career fairs and info sessions. So they're a way to learn about the companies you're applying to and drop off your resume, as well as meet people that you could email later. So instead of cold emailing, you could be like, hey, we talked, or not hey, but like obviously professionally, but hi, we talked at the information session that you were at Berkeley. I really enjoyed hearing about this project that you were on. And I had a few questions that I didn't have time to ask in the session. For example, how do you feel like your degree, which is also in the same field as me, prepare you for consulting? Something like that. And then they'll be like, "Oh, thanks for reaching out. Like, I'd love to talk to you for 20 minutes on Friday." And then you guys can chat, and now you have a very personal relationship. This is just a quick attire slide. So for career fairs, it's usually pretty formal. So that was just like a quick snapshot. And you want to make sure to bring your resume, and something that is probably one of the best pieces of advice I can give people that are starting off in college is make an Excel spreadsheet right now and take notes of every person that you meet in a like a networking setting, a business setting, and just have like a full spreadsheet that's like this person's name, here's the company they worked at, here's where I met them, and here's what we talked about. Because, for example, freshman year, I went to a coffee chat with Deloitte just because they were like in the plaza of our school. And I was like, oh, I'll say hi. Like, they didn't really have anything for freshmen. I talked to this one lady for a while and then I left. And then 2 years later, I find myself applying to their junior year position, and I emailed her and I was like, "Hey, you gave me your business card a couple of years ago. We talked about blah blah blah, and I found our conversation really interesting. I wanted to ask about junior year internships now that I can apply." And she was like, "Oh, that's so cool that you remembered me. I would love to chat." Um, so definitely keep track of who you've spoken to. It also helps you follow up later. So, for example, sophomore year, I had an job offer from Bank of America, but it wasn't in the division that I wanted to work, so I didn't take it. But junior year, I reapplied for the division I wanted, and I was able to reach out to all my contacts from the previous year because I kept track of them. This is just quickly how to introduce yourself, pretty straightforward. And then the last thing I wanted to do before questions is just a quick overview on the common careers people do out of college. So, the four big ones that I think most people want to do is actually, I said investment banking, but think of just finance in general. Investment banking is the most popular within finance, but there's a lot of other roles that people are also interested in. So it's basically consulting, finance, product management, and software engineering. Consulting is working with different companies on business strategy topics. So there's consulting firms such as McKinsey that different companies such as Target hire to work on very specific things. So Target might be like, "Hey, we have this new product line that's doing poorly. Can you tell us why and if we should like keep selling it and change something or we should get rid of it entirely?" So McKinsey would tell them. And then the second is finance in general. So there's a lot of different roles at investment banks. There's sales and trading, and so they're the ones like trading different different things. So it could be like commodities, it could be equities. Then there's people that do research into different stocks. There's people that are bankers. So bankers basically help companies facilitate deals. So let's say Target says, okay, with e-commerce being so big, we really want to have a better sense of the data on all our company on our all our products that are selling on our company website. So let's say they say, okay, we could build out this data tool in-house, but it'll be really expensive. Let's just acquire a small company that already does it. So that's really common practice in business. And so that acquisition would be facilitated by bankers. The last two are product management, which is usually at tech companies. People work with the engineering side of things and the business side of things to work on developing products. And then the software engineering side is the like technical side of product management where you're working on developing code and software for a company. I have like some knowledge on this from like speaking to my friends, but I definitely have never recruited for it myself. So the first two are the ones where I would have the most knowledge. But yeah, that was mainly what I wanted to go over. I hope there was something helpful in it for everyone, and I would love to answer any questions.
No, that was great, and in fact, you talked about the different paths. I think some of the themes you talked about are relevant no matter what uh, company or what position you're applying for. So I think very relevant points. So we'll just open it up for Q&A. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you want to just ask it in the comment, that's fine. There's one coming in on the presentation. Yes, I will send out the recording as well as the presentation as we did for the college apps session. I'll do the same thing for this one.
So someone messaged me privately and said, "Do you think the same process can apply to students who want to pursue a medical career, especially during the time of a pandemic?" So that's a great question. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about the different professional paths people can take after college since I kind of knew that I wanted to work for a while. But what I would say about med school is you're a lot of this still applies to you. Like you're still gonna need a resume for sure because something I should have mentioned is you don't just need your resume to apply to internships, you also need it to apply to clubs at college. And so Berkeley has a ton of medical clubs. Like just one example would be like there's a club that actually travels internationally to provide medical care in developing countries over spring break. And so you would need a resume to apply to them. Um, and then in terms of internships, you can use the cold emailing strategies and all the other strategies that I talked about to find internships in the medical field as well. And then in terms of during the time of a pandemic, it's probably increasingly difficult to do in-person internships, which I completely understand. But there's a lot of programs like with hospitals that are great internships for students, and I'm sure they're still doing some things virtually. And there's also a lot of companies where you can do business internships related to healthcare. So, for example, United Health is like the biggest health insurance provider in the country, and like they have a lot of internships. Does anyone else have any questions? You can unmute or message me privately or message everyone.
Yeah, and for the medical field, again, I'd like to remind you, we have a very strong network in the Kashmiri Pandit community. So yeah, please reach out to your parents or their friends and relatives. I think I'm sure you'll find a lot of good advice and knowledge.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think like talking to people of a lot of age ranges is really helpful because if you talk to someone that's a parent or older, they'll be able to give you so much good advice on what their career's been like. And if you talk to someone my age that, like you, is interested in med school, they can give you a lot of advice on the steps they took to be successful in applications. And people that are older than me have saved me from so many like mistakes in terms of recruiting and internships and applying to things. I know applying to med school involves a lot of different things. And so people that have done it will definitely be a great resource for you. So I got a message that said, "Do you know of any good engineering internships people you know have gone into higher ranking schools have done?" So are you asking for at the college level or at the high school level? I think at the college level, oh, at the high school level, I know like Boeing sometimes takes high school interns. There's not that many companies that would seek out high school engineering interns just because engineering is very specialized. So like they'll just take college students that have actually taken courses in that, which is why I recommend my cold emailing method. So if I don't know what type of engineering you're interested in, but let's say there's a company that you want to work at, such as Boeing, you can look at people that have roles you're interested in and just email them and be like, "Hey, do you have time?" Okay, so it seems like you're thinking of biomedical and material science. So let's say you're interested in so I think one thing, if you're interested in like the biomedical field or like material science, is to email professors at colleges near you and say, "Hey, I see that you're researching something in this field. This is a great thing for high schoolers to do. Reach out to professors around you that go to, like, colleges nearby and say, 'Is there anything I can do unpaid to help you with your research?'" And a lot of times they'll have, like, data entry or other things you can do, and you can learn a lot from them. You could also find, like, there's so many biomedical startups, and startups are always looking for an extra pair of hands, so, like, smaller companies, especially if you're willing to do something unpaid, and so you can just message and be like, "I'm really interested in the work you guys are doing, and I was wondering if you had a chance to chat about, like, your experience at the company," and, you can say that okay, there was another message, but yeah, you can basically chat with them and they might have opportunities, and then there was a question about the previous presentation, so Ashimama, can you send along the previous presentation to them?
Yes, I can. I saw Pikiji. I got a few other messages. So yeah, I will. If you send me the uh, anybody who wants that, I can send the previous email. There's another question on how to find KPs in consulting investment banking field.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, to answer your specific question, I would say LinkedIn is a great resource. So, if you find if you find professional network groups that are like Kashmiri pundits in the US professional network group, for example, anyone in that group is going to be a Kashmiri pundit, obviously. So you can look at the different roles they have and see are any of them in consulting or investment banking. And it's really easy on LinkedIn to sort by companies. The other strategy is definitely ask your parents, and they'll probably have a sense of like who all is in our community. And if they can even connect you with one person in consulting or investment banking, that person will know so many other people that it will be really helpful. So I think those are the two best strategies. And also think about other groups you're a part of. So, for example, alumni of your high school or college, like um, KPs are a great place to start, but you want to think of like every group that you've been in and don't limit yourself. So, even like I found like in general, Indian people are very likely to help me out if they're like, oh, she's also um her family's from India too, and that's like a connection we have and we can bond over. And that's not to say like someone needs to share a piece of their identity with you in order for you to reach out to them, but like having something in common with someone definitely helps. And then someone asked if the cold emailing strategy works for working with professors. It definitely does. Professors' emails are also very easy to find because they have like their own website. So I would say that if you go to like a college's website and you look at their class catalog and sort by subject, look at the subjects you're interested in, make a list of those professors, look into their research, what papers are they working on, and then you can use that when you email them. And I think emailing business professionals can be a little bit more like cookie cutter. Like you can kind of send basically the same email to a lot of people. With professors, like they're really all about learning. So I would make sure that you demonstrate that you're really interested in their research and that you would love to like work with them and talk to them and learn from them.
Just one point I wanted to add was a lot of the parents are on local WhatsApp groups. So if you're really interested in a subject, just have your parents send a message on that, asking for advice or information on who are people in the relevant field, and I'm sure you'll see a great response.
Were there any other questions? I'm happy to answer anything. If anyone has any specific questions to like something you've been considering about your resume or anything like that, I can also answer that. Okay, it seems like that might have been all the questions. Um, yeah, if you think of I saw another one. Okay, so someone asked good companies for internships in business. Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that what I've seen in college is that people interested in business are most likely to go into investment banking or consulting before they are more likely to want to do that than just work for one company in business out of college. I think the reason for that is basically in consulting, you get to work with a lot of different types of companies. And there's a very established list of, like, the best consulting companies, so you could just look that up, like, I could like, there's 3 ones that are really well known, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, and then there's also a lot of other ones like Accenture, Deloitte, LEK LEK, yeah, and so those are very easily Googleable if you just Google, like, top consulting firms. You definitely have to be at least a junior in college to get most of those, sometimes sophomore. So if you're in high school, I do think it would be good to either go the finance route. So if there's like smaller investment banks in your area or hedge funds, you could probably do something with them in finance. And if you're interested in more the strategy side of business, you could reach out to startups in your area and ask them about their business strategy, even for example, local businesses. So if you're in high school and you can do an internship where you work with your local coffee company and maybe they've been hit really hard by COVID and they're not really familiar with operating a website and you explain to them how to put their information online, that would be a huge help. Like, you could literally potentially save their business by showing them how to use social media, how to use the internet better. Um, and so that could be extremely helpful. And so, especially in high school, don't limit your opportunities. It doesn't have to be like a huge name, but otherwise, if you're just looking for like good businesses to intern with, like, you can always just search up, like, the Fortune 500 list, which will tell you, like, the biggest companies.
And as an example, I just put a LinkedIn. Ramesh ji from our community is the global CIO at Bain. So there's numerous such examples of people who are in these fields, right?
Yeah, um, that's a great connection, and, yeah, so there's definitely a lot of people. You just have to ask around, I think. Um, Someone else asked, "What would you suggest to do if professors do not allow virtual research if COVID is not gone by summer?" That's a great question. COVID is definitely changing things. I would say email as many professors as you can to see if any of them let you do something virtual. And then if no professors are allowing virtual research, if you're in high school, you can think of other things such as maybe taking their class online or looking instead of doing research with a professor at companies in the field you're interested in, emailing people at those companies and trying to find a high school internship that way. Also, if you're interested in a certain industry, for example, let's say you wanted to do research related to the medical field, maybe instead you could shadow someone that is in the medical field. But obviously, all these things become really challenging with COVID, which if you're at the high school level, that's something that colleges understand. They're not expecting you to be doing research in person. And if you're at the high school level and if you're at the college level, most internships and research has moved online pretty seamlessly. Yes. So I can type my email. So yeah, please reach out to me if you have any questions about the presentation or recruiting, or you're interested in any of the same fields I'm interested in. Um, I'm currently doing investment banking. I'm also just interested in business in general. And so I would be really happy to talk to anyone who has any questions. And you can also just reach out to me later too. Like, maybe you don't have questions right now, but you go to college next year and then have like questions about your resume. I think Ashumamu can answer the recordings question.
Yeah, so I had shared the link for the previous room. What I'll do is, since there's a demand for the previous one, I'll probably share both in the next email that goes out, and so that way you'll have both the sessions. And we had shared both the we had shared the presentation. We can do the same for this one. You're okay with that, right, Anika?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate you joining this session. And Anika, you're getting some compliments. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
addressing all the people on this call. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming on a Saturday, and see you soon. Bye.